Well, hi everybody. Meteorologist Joe Chaffee. Welcome to the Joe Chaffee Weather Show on this Wednesday, September 11th, 2019. It's 3 minutes after 7 o'clock Eastern Time. And it was a day here in my neck of the woods. We saw some 90-degree highs at Newark, at LaGuardia, I believe, in New York City, though New York City Central Park, which is usually the spot that everybody's kind of the go-to spot when it comes to a New York City temperature. It only got to 87, and it made it pretty much upper 80s and low 90s all the way down through southeastern Pennsylvania, southern New Jersey. It was a very hot day. It was a somewhat humid day, but this time of year with the sun angle getting lower, the humidity to me doesn't have as much impact. It does feel uncomfortable, but I think it feels worse on a July day where you have that strong July sun, the dew points up into the 70s, and the temperatures that are up between 90 and 95. And the nights, at least this time of year, tend to get a little bit cooler, which is good. You're not, oftentimes in some of these really hot days, I'm sitting here at the 10 or 11 o'clock, and the temperature in some places is still barely gone under the 90-degree mark. So it's a little bit better. Some big changes coming, though. This burst of heat today is a one-day affair. It's for my area. However, from southernmost New Jersey southward down into the Washington, D.C., Baltimore area, probably one more day of very warm to hot temperatures before the backdoor cold front that's coming down. It's not a true backdoor cold front, but the front that is coming down is going to bring back the onshore flow for a couple of days. This is the pattern that we have been in, the short term, sort of a pattern within a pattern, I guess if you want to call it. And we're going to be going through this. We just went through it now, went from onshore flow to borderline hot and humid, back to onshore flow, back to very warm to borderline hot and somewhat humid for Sunday and Monday of next week, and then another front on Monday with another onshore flow behind it. So that's just the way it is with that jet stream setting up. We also are looking at two tropical systems. That one is now off the Florida coast, just east of the Bahamas. It has persisted. We've seen shower and thunderstorm activity increase to some degree overnight and today, but we still don't see a whole lot of organization here. You can see it on the satellite. It's still well to the east, and we have some strong upper air winds that are preventing this from developing. We're going to come back to this a little later on. There are some showers and thunderstorms breaking out tonight. There's actually a fairly interesting line that is moving across Virginia at the moment and moving southeastward. The Storm Prediction Center had its area of marginal risk this morning, which it actually expanded a little bit for this evening and tonight. It has that marginal risk going up to about Long Island and just north of New York City, but you can kind of pick out this line that's moving across Virginia and heading east. That's holding together fairly well. Two severe thunderstorm watches going on right now as of 7:07 Eastern Time. We've got the one that is across southern Wisconsin and into Michigan. It looks like it's just north of Chicago, but Milwaukee is in it. And that is inside an area of slight risk. And then you've got this slight to some enhanced risk being indicated for parts of western Nebraska and a very tiny portion of northeastern Colorado and a small sliver of southeastern Wyoming, encased inside a larger area of slight risk that moves out of the Rockies and into the Central Plains. So still some severe weather issues going on. We are thinking here in the east anyway, and in that marginal risk. I saw a couple of severe thunderstorm warnings that popped up in parts of central Pennsylvania, but they came and went quickly and haven't really seen too many since. Here's WPC's rainfall forecast map, and I think this is an important map to look at with regards to what they're calling for, because it does give us an idea of what they're thinking when it comes to this system that's east of the Florida coast and east of the Bahamas. The 7-day rainfall amounts from the Bahamas west to coastal Florida and even touching parts of coastal Georgia, and then jumping on the other side in the northeastern Gulf of Mexico, because this is where many of the models that take whatever does develop with this disturbed weather into the northeast Gulf. The rainfall amounts there of 5 inches or more, not impossible, and that range spreads into Alabama. Of course, this is all going to depend on what the system does. And if you look at the basic upper air, that's kind of the logical place for this system to go, which is to move with some kind of weak low that develops in the next day or two along or just north of the north coast of Cuba, moves across either South Florida or the Florida Straits, and then makes the turn to the northwest. If you look at the different satellite loops and the water vapor imageries and all the rest of it, you'll see where the upper flow is taking things. So that is the logical place for any system to go. And one of the things that we're going to have to think about here is, being that we're talking about something that moves northwestward in the eastern Gulf of Mexico, it sort of limits the time of development. When they come up straight from the south and they cover a lot of water, like Michael did last year, for example, that's an opportunity where you see a storm that can strengthen into a major hurricane. I would tend to think, looking at this and looking in terms of the timing and what we're dealing with, that even though conditions may become favorable, at the moment I would think that we're looking at something that maybe gets to tropical storm strength to a certain extent, and becomes a wet rainstorm for the areas that you see WPC are those areas that they're indicating. I think that makes the most sense at this point. I'm not really overly concerned about something that's going to deepen rapidly. The only thing I would say is that if you wind up taking something that gets a little bit further to the west, a little bit further offshore before it kind of makes that more northwest turn, then you could be dealing with something that is a bit more substantial. So I just want to take a look tonight. We're going to look at the water vapor imagery here. It's very useful to see what the atmosphere is doing in this perspective. And I like to look at the mid-levels. Sort of gives you a fair compromise between the highest levels and the very low levels, although there are times when you are going to want to see the low-level one or the high-level one. So there's a couple of things I want to point out. So obviously, first, here's your disturbed weather, and it's in a rather large moisture field. I'm going to make that circle just a little bit less thick, okay? There you go. So obviously you've got a lot of moisture there. You got a ton of dry air here that's getting drawn into this upper low. There's an upper low in the mid levels and also in the high levels of the atmosphere that is dropping southwestward from the Florida Panhandle out into the open waters of the Gulf of Mexico. And when you take a look at the flow itself, okay, you can actually see the troughing that is here at the mid levels and upper levels of the atmosphere. So this is producing some, rather strong winds in the upper atmosphere, and it's keeping this system from really developing. The winds are not strong enough where they're ripping the system completely apart. On the other hand, it has inhibited development so far. But one of the things that the models are showing is that this upper low is going to drop southwestward and then eventually turn back northwestward or even northward. Once it does that, and it's starting to do that now, and it'll be out further into the Gulf of Mexico when we get to Friday, that's going to change the upper profile here from being under the influence of a cyclone with counterclockwise winds. You're going to wind up having the influence being under an anticyclone or high. And when we talk about tropical systems, you want to see, if you see a high over it, that is a pretty good indication that you are talking about something that is going to be strengthening. And as this upper low pulls away more to the west, it allows an upper high to develop in this particular region. And then, of course, you're going to have this system moving westward, and low pressure is going to develop underneath that upper high. This is a light wind shear environment, which is something that tropical systems really do like. Now, elsewhere, get rid of this for a moment, you can also see the overall jet stream pattern here with a bit of a trough here out in the west, and then it comes across, and then it moves just about the southern edge of that jet stream over New Jersey. In this part of the U.S., in the east, of course, you've got a upper high. I'm going to try to use a color that stands out a bit more. Let's see if this works. So you have this upper high here in the east. And by the way, if you look carefully, right in here, this is actually kind of interesting, but right in this section here, just to the north of where I have drawn that upper high, there's a small upper low right in there. You see it just kind of spinning away. It's adorable in its own fashion. So the northern jet is pretty far south down into the Rockies, but it pulls up north, of course, and we've been dealing with this back and forth, and now the upper high is going to be weakening, and that's going to allow for some cooler air to move into the northeast, and it's going to be moving from New England southward. So you're going to see this, kind of build up. A high is going to build into New England, and you're going to have cold air and drier air draining southward for later tomorrow and for Friday. So we are going to see some changes. The high is going to flatten out. The heat's going to retreat a bit, and that is good news. Back to this satellite view, and there's of course, your disturbed weather. You got actually a little bit of weather going on in the western Gulf. Probably some kind of upper trough there. And, of course, the action across the United States with some of the thunderstorms that have broken out this evening. So here's the line of storms I was talking about that's moving out of Johnny Quest land in northwestern Virginia. That line's actually held together pretty well this evening, pushing its way to the east. Still some strong cells here as of 7:16 p.m. In that line. And we also have some clusters here of storms across Pennsylvania. So these I'm going to want to watch going forward as to see if they hold together, because I think that with this frontal boundary that is to the north, and I'll just sort of draw it in here. You've got this frontal boundary that's up to the north that we're sort of waiting for this to move southward and get through here. But these clusters are going to attempt to stay together as they move eastward. Some of them are going to weaken, but I think some of these are going to hold up, and they may impact my neck of the woods, which is pretty much, I usually talk about everybody kind of in this area, although sometimes I'll go a little bit further to the south, and sometimes I'll reference points a little bit further to the north and on up into upstate New York. The pen is lagging because I'm drawing on a loop, but for those of you who watch every day, you know that this is my primary region of focus. But of course, we always do extend it to other places. By the way, this is, I think, just a really quick, good time. If you're new to the channel, I just want to say welcome, and be sure to hit the subscribe button because this way you'll get notified of future live streams, which we do almost every night. And of course, subscribing is utterly and absolutely free. You just need a Gmail address, and then you can jump in on the chat, which is always pretty lively. Okay, so let's get to the surface maps, and I want to go. Let's talk a bit more about the tropics. And what I've pulled up here is the Pacific, and you'll notice that across the tropical basin in the Pacific, it's like a railroad train of lows here that the model picks up on. And one of the things that I think we're going to watch for closely in the coming week or so is the impact of any kind of developing cyclones in the West Pacific that find their way to recurve and head northeastward. Like you have this one, this low that came in. I don't know how deep this was, that moved in from the west over Japan. It came in from the southeast and then went up through the Sea of Japan and then just turned northeastward from there. That low actually strengthens considerably as it passes by Korea and moves on up to the northeast, so and eventually to the Aleutians. And the reason why these recurving typhoons are important is because they tend to energize upper lows that find their way into the Gulf of Alaska. And that creates an upper ridge in the west coast of the United States, which in turn creates a trough, and in some instances a deep trough in the east. So let's watch going forward. And obviously these recurving typhoons, depending on one model run or another, are going to have impact on the snapshots that we look at when we look at the model runs. But the thing that's important here is when we go through the weekend and into next week, there is a change in the pattern in North America. Now, initially, early next week, we drop a deep trough along the west coast, and you can see it here. It's pretty obvious on the GFS. Just trying to get a different color here for you. So here we go. So here you have this deep trough that is developing in the west coast, and of course there's a corresponding strong upper ridge that develops in the not quite the east. Hello, hang on. Let me erase that. Okay, I'm still learning this, folks. So here's your ridge now that builds up from an upper high that's kind of sitting down here in the central Gulf states, and then builds up into central Canada. And you can't see it on the other end, but there's a trough off the east coast. You also have a strong ridge here in the Gulf of Alaska that builds up. Now, going forward, for after later next week, that trough in the west swings eastward, and now you start to see this deep upper low that moves into the Aleutians and creates troughing right along 160 in the longer term, and you see it there. Typhoons recurving, and you'll notice that there are a couple of them that try. One succeeds, and maybe another one or two follow. But the point is that as these typhoons recurve, they may attempt to energize the upper low that you see on the map there, south of the Aleutians. And hang on, I just want to clean this up a little bit, and let's get a bit of a red color. I always like to do troughs in red, make this a little bit bigger. So here's your upper low that's there. And by the way, Hawaii is at about 160, so this is actually a little bit left of 160. The model today was a little bit further to the left with this trough that's out there. You do have ridging just off the west coast that develops and goes up into Canada, and then another deep trough that runs from Hudson Bay down into Mexico, and then a strong ridge off the east coast. So positioning is going to be important, obviously, but you'll notice that overall we're talking about amplitude here. These systems are strong. They're not these shortwave troughs that are maybe just going across the northern plains and or maybe across the southern states if we had a southern portion of the jet stream. This is a almost attempt to make something that what we call a full latitude trough that goes pretty far north to south, extending from the polar region almost all the way down into at least into the subtropics. So that's a pretty strong trough here, but you want to look for a trough near 160 because that would position a trough in the east in a place where you have to start wondering whether there could be some kind of problem if there's a tropical system, because that would create a southerly or a south-southwest flow along the east coast. So this is something I think we're going to need to pay attention to. And the Pacific is always the big driver in my view. It really kind of dictates the flow just about everywhere. across the northern hemisphere certainly. So even when you're looking in the wintertime, we almost always look at the Pacific far more than we necessarily look at the Atlantic when it comes to this sort of thing. But you can see how it looks like in the long range. Now, we don't know whether it's going to get to this point, but it seems like the models have been going this way now for the last 4 or 5 days. The idea of showing troughing here, at least in the middle of the U.S. and maybe even a bit further to the east. So we're going to want to pay close attention here with regards to any kind of tropical cyclone development later next week and beyond. I'm not concerned about whatever happens with the stuff in the east of the Bahamas, because that I think is destined for the Gulf of Mexico. But we should pay close attention, maybe to start to pay a little closer attention to anything that is potential for later in the week. Now, I want to talk about the system that is now coming off the African coast, not the one that is closer to the islands, because I don't think we're going to see much from that. And by the way, I don't know if NHC has fixed this, but if you've been looking at some of the loops that you can access here, it's sort of an inside way to get to the GOES website. But a lot of these loops, as of earlier today, were not quite working correctly. I'll see if they fixed them. I think they just did. They kind of stopped at 1 o'clock in the morning yesterday, and now they've been corrected. So I'm going to just make this a little bit of a longer loop and go out 72 frames. So at least we take it back to this morning. And what the system that I think is, you've got a couple of things here. So you've got this, obviously you have this system here. Okay, so that we know, this is the one we're thinking might go do something like this. Okay, then you have a weak tropical wave that is in this position here, but I really think this is done for. There upper level winds right now. You can see the clouds that are coming off South America and blowing southwest to northeast. So that's going to get sheared apart. I think the one to watch is this one. Okay, this is the one that I think is going to move westward and become the system that it may become something of importance when it reaches the Leeward Islands. It's got a long way to go. There's no guarantee that it's going to make it there. In fact, I will tell you, after so many runs of the models doing something with that, the most recent GFS actually does nothing with it and has one behind it that it does something with, and that one winds up getting pulled out to sea anyway. So just all of this, of course, is speaking in theory at this point, but with regards to that system that is now moving past the Cabo Verde Islands, if we assume that it makes its way across, and I'm going to use the 12Z run today because it was consistent with the European, and the 18Z really kind of sort of went to left field a little bit on a couple of things. So I'm going to just sort of discount that one for now. But if you watch, and we talked about this yesterday, going forward, you can see that the upper winds are, at least with the Gulf, the system that's east of the Bahamas, you've got these southwest winds that are blowing from the Caribbean to Cuba and then going northeastward from there over all that convection. So there really is no room for this to develop. But the upper low that is sitting over the Florida Panhandle there, this is what I was talking about earlier. It drops southwestward, and suddenly you have this big developing upper high over Florida and the eastern Gulf, and you have a good south-southwest outflow that develops through the central Gulf. So this, I think, opens the door for the potential. This is your outflow, okay? And here's your upper high. And underneath that upper high is going to be whatever surface low that develops out of this. So you are setting up for conditions being much more favorable when this gets into the Florida Straits and the Gulf of Mexico. Meanwhile, if this is to be believed, and assuming that it's still going to be this way when the 0Z run of the GFS comes out, there's the system coming westward has its own upper high with it that builds and expands once it gets into the Northeast Caribbean. and you can see it here, how wrapped up this is. This is all at the 30,000 foot level. We have this big upper high that is sitting over that. And that's what tropical cyclones love, that, because it creates low wind shear environments that it can develop on. So conditions here are going to be rather favorable for development. Now, there are other factors in play that could hinder it, including a track that, if it does materialize, could potentially be over the islands of Puerto Rico and Hispaniola, which have elevation. So, and of course, and we're now talking about, we're at day 6 of the long range. So we're starting to get into that point that I often say you got to be, you have to use it with increasingly larger grains of salt going forward. But my point is that the upper air seems to be favorable for some stuff to develop. Now, where this all winds up in the long term remains to be seen. But certainly we need to keep an eye on the tropics. All right, so back home, because it's, as I say many times, it's so pointless to really get too worked up on the specifics after day 5 and 6. So we're just going to kind of stay in the time frame of the GFS through the next 7 days to take a look at it. And if you want to go look at the models on your own, you certainly could do that by going to tropicaltidbits.com, which has probably the best site you can go to when it comes to weather models and weather maps, because they're all there. So here's the GFS, and as we talked about for tomorrow, here is your whoops, let me get rid of that. So here's your frontal boundary, and here's your high that is building southward. So you're going to have an increasing north to northeast wind, but it's going to take a good portion of the day for that front to move far enough south. But it will get through, and after that, after tomorrow evening, we're going to see this front drop down. Whoops, here we go. So you see it dropping down into Virginia and even into North Carolina. That is a pretty strong onshore flow that develops here. Hang on, sorry about that. You've got northeast winds all the way down into North Carolina. And actually, the air coming into New England here is pretty cool. Meanwhile, back out just to the west is a low with a warm front that is moving eastward. So obviously, here comes the next change for the weekend. And there you go. So the high drops to the south. The winds bend around to south and southwest. We turn warmer and more humid for Saturday and Sunday. I think much of the time, Friday through Sunday, should be rain-free. I mean, maybe there's the odd shower, scattered shower on Saturday as the warmer, more humid air comes in. Sunday looks to be rather warm and humid, and so does Monday. But here comes the next front for Monday that's moving through. And after that, there's your next high that builds up to the north. This is like the third or fourth one that's done that. And here comes the onshore flow once again, which means we will cool off. And by this time, by the way, if you notice on the GFS, it really did not do very much with this system that's in the Florida Straits. It just kind of has a weak open low, a weak low that moves northwestward and never really gets it going. That doesn't mean it's right. I would rather look at the conditions aloft and go from there, and let the satellite loops and the radars and the water vapor loops tell you what's happening, rather than look at the models, because they're not really designed to handle tropical systems very well. Not the standard global models. They do a fair job, and certainly once something is there, they handle it much better. But in the formative stages, sometimes it can be really tricky, and we've seen it already a few times where the models have lost things in their formative stages, and they wound up being there. So I just want to see they still don't have, I'm kind of surprised they didn't run an HWRF. Oh, they did run a big for 95L. Okay, so this is the one for the Gulf states. And the HWRF is a model that's really notorious for spinning up everything that moves, well, spinning things up in a big way. And unfortunately, we only have it out to 75 hours. on these maps that are really tight, it's the geography that moves. The idea is that the storm is going to be in the center of the picture, so you're going to see your geography kind of jump around. It can be really deceiving in terms of the motion, but it looks like the motion is pretty much west or west-northwest. It actually develops a closed low and maybe a tropical depression here that jumps around all over the place in South Florida, and this is as far out as we have, which is to late Saturday afternoon, with the low emerging in the Gulf of Mexico between Port Charlotte and Tampa. So just we'll see if it's right. I would have been more interested in seeing what it did from here as it moved it to the northwest, and it loves to spin everything down to a Category 3 hurricane. Just bear that in mind. It loves to do that. So so it's one of those broken clocks are right twice a day scenarios with this particular model. Though we do like to use it. Scott Briller, thank you so much for hitting Super Chat tonight. Really appreciate it very much. Thank you. And that is that's certainly a cup of coffee for me, and it helps, especially on some nights when I'm falling asleep in my chair. Daniel Fitzsimmons, you want snow in Bay Shore? Well, you got to wait at least 2.5 to 3 months for it. Philip Neary, I'm good with this. So those of you who may not know, I mentioned it a few times. Did you guys have the maps on the screen? Please tell me that I didn't screw that up, did I? Oh boy, did I mess that up? Oh boy, I'm so sorry. I am so sorry. It turned it into a podcast. Oh, you see. Oh God. I'm very embarrassed. I'm very sorry. Because I really like showing you all the maps and drawing on them, and I'm going crazy, and I can't see your chat while I got the maps up because the screen I use, I have it down to the smallest size, and if I make it any smaller, I can't really see, then I can't really see the maps. So, all right, so it was a podcast. Let's just say it was just like a podcast and just leave it at that, okay? So, and there's nothing really too much important that's going to be happening from the next several days. Oh, boy. It's been a long day. All right, so for those of you who don't know, I mentioned this a couple of times. I'm at Fios One News, which broadcasts for Long Island, New Jersey, and the Hudson Valley. We are going off the air for good at the middle of November. So I will be done. And actually, this was a good thing for me because of the fact that I have actually been seriously thinking about calling it quits at the end of this year anyway, because I want to devote myself full time to my online, my little online empire, my YouTube channel, my Patreon platform, the 3 websites that I have, the 2 weather apps I have, which includes the new one we just came out with for Angry Ben, my buddy Ben Scott, who does my nycweathernow.com website. So I just wanted to really just focus on that 7 days a week. I'm doing it 7 days a week. I'm doing it 7 days a week as it is. But there are times during the day. There are times during the day where I can't get to do what I would like to do. 3 hours a day in my car because I drive 65 miles each way to work, and that has really gotten to me. So I was really kind of thinking very seriously, considering putting an end to all of this at the end of this year anyway. So they've kind of did me a big favor by pushing. It's very hard when you've worked all your life for somebody, and then or a series of companies. If you've always worked with someone, worked for someone, when to go out on your own is a tough thing to do. A lot of guys and gals that I know have done this, and a lot of them, when they've done it that way from the get-go, from the start, that's the world that they know, and they can make things work. For me, it's a whole new experience, but I do know that I love doing what I'm doing and doing it for me. And I've really not only enjoyed myself, but I've loved the whole building concept here. And the audience is getting bigger and bigger, and that's a good thing. So that's where I'm going to be. So starting November, my last day here is November 15th, and in theory. And after that, it's going to be full time, just this. So I'm really looking forward to this. It actually is going to make my life a lot easier because I'll have more downtime. 3 hours not in the car is 3 hours I could be going to the gym or taking a ride on my bike or whatever it is. So anyway, that's what we have to look forward to. Johnny Quest, can a Cat 5 hurricane absorb a Cat 1 hurricane? Sure can, and has. Usually, when they get close enough, one kind of overpowers the other. Go back and look. If you go back and look at Matthew and Nicole in 2016, because they formed very, very close together. And originally it thought that Matthew was going to absorb Nicole, and I think Nicole wound up absorbing Matthew. And they were two two very strong hurricanes. I think they were both Category 3 hurricanes, and they were only about 600 miles apart. But yeah, usually one does tend to overpower the other. If they're both strong enough, you'll see what they call the Fujiwara effect, where one just sort of rotates. They kind of rotate around each other like a pinwheel. And if you ever want to demonstrate the concept of the Fujiwara effect, get two tops, okay, and spin those tops and watch what happens as they get close together. The forces of the spinning should repel them. They'll get close, and then the forces generated by the spinning will repel them apart. So that's what happens in the atmosphere as well. Let's see. My dad always said, Kathleen Trudy, there's always room for somebody good. Thank you. I appreciate that, Kathleen. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Ruru25, nice to see you on board. So if one overpowers the other, then which name does it keep? Well, you're able to identify the system that's dominant, and of course, you'll know. You'll see it on the satellite because the other one will just degenerate, and you'll see the moisture being absorbed by the other. And there are numerous instances of that happening over the years. The best years to look would be to look at the more active years because there's a better chance of having multiple storms on the map in those years in a given place. Get multiple storms going on, and if they're close together, you wind up seeing one absorbing the other. Rick 8013, 95L, the afternoon model showing a weaker system for the most part, 20 to 50 knots. Yeah, I kind of think that if that develops in the north, in the Gulf, there's not a whole lot of room here for strengthening. The trip over the water is going to be a relatively short one because of the angle. It could wind up being a fairly wet rainstorm. So, I don't want to lose sight of the fact that, if we're dealing with a tropical storm, once it goes inland and it's slow moving, that you could wind up with something that produces quite a bit of rain. So we want to also put that on the table as well. There have been many tropical storms over the years that never strengthened to hurricanes, but went down in history because they produced mega amounts of rain. Not saying that this is going to be that, but it is something that I think we have to leave on the table. All right, folks, I'm going to call it a night here. Thanks for being here. Sorry about the map thing. But, I kind of made a mistake. So I appreciate your kindness and the latitude that you give me. So here's the situation. AS, I will get you to your question in 1 second. So here's the situation for tomorrow. Weather at 5 in the morning. Live stream tomorrow evening. Website posts in between. So look for weather in 5 probably sometime between 8 and 9 a.m. And the live stream tomorrow night at 7 o'clock Eastern time. AS, thank you for your amazing education. What do you think about the chance of a hurricane that is the furthest one east. I think it's the system that is now just southwest of the Cabo Verde Islands. That's the one that we're going to have to watch when it approaches the Leeward Islands late in the weekend. I think that is the one that I think is going to try to develop. The GFS has been on that board. Suddenly on this last run, it says, no, it's a wave behind that one. Or actually, you maybe could even make an argument that it's the same wave. It's just that it's so much slower that it develops further east, and as a result gets caught by a trough that's out in the Atlantic. So I think you have to consider that possibility, because things across the Atlantic don't seem to be across the tropical Atlantic right now don't seem to be moving very quickly from west to east. Philip Neary, when is the next local appearance for me in Suffolk County? Okay, I will tell you that I do have something booked now at the Sachem Library, but it's not until early February. I think it's February 4th. So and it's in the afternoon at 2 o'clock, and it's also on a weekday. I got to go back and check on the actual date, but I'm thinking it's February 4th, and it's at 2 o'clock in the afternoon talk at the Sachem Library. So, but in the meantime, I am around. So if we could figure out and arrange something. Maybe we can get a few of the Suffolk County guys together, and we'll do, we could do a weather live stream or do some weather just for you guys. How's that? I'm going to have plenty of time on my hands soon to be able to do that. So that's an idea to consider for those of you who, I'm a Long Island guy, so if we can figure something out, you snow removal guys, you get a bunch of the snow removal guys together, and we can, sit around and we will talk weather, and we can go through maps and explain the things that go over the things you know and explain the things that you don't know, and I will learn new things as well. By the way, very quickly, don't forget, I have my expanded and weather-intensive platform on Patreon for those of you who are, really into weather. It's just $2 a month. And I do a lot of extra stuff, including live streams just for, tape videos for Patreon members. Weather in 10, which I usually do in the afternoon. So consider that, and also an easy way. And I'll get to those last questions in a minute, guys, so just hang tight. I see them there. But I just want to get this out there. An easy way to support what I'm doing that doesn't cost you a dime is if you shop on Amazon. Use this link that I'm putting up on the chat board, and just use the search bar, buy whatever it is you want to buy. You don't have to buy what's on the page. And Amazon throws me back a little bit of coin, so I get a cigar or two out of it. And we're a participant in the Amazon Services LLC program, which is an affiliate advertising program designed to provide a means for me to earn some fees while linking to Amazon.com and its affiliated sites. Johnny Quest, thanks so much, guys. You're really very generous, and I really appreciate that you hit Super Chat. Thank you so much. Any reason the legacy model, Scott Briller wants to know, is only 240 hours? Probably, I'm thinking because Levi Cowan has got only so much room in his server, so perhaps he's only limiting it to 240. On the other hand, maybe that's all they're limiting it to, and only shooting it out to 240. I don't even know why they still have it available publicly. I guess they're holding on to it in case the upgraded GFS needs to go in for another repair. Rex Hijacker, can this hit Louisiana? Rex, I think that the turn to the northwest will be a little tighter and go further to the east. But I wouldn't totally discount it, and if it winds up taking a track that's a little more west before it turns northwest and north, if that upper height of the north is a bit stronger, then you might be dealing with perhaps a stronger tropical storm that moves northwestward. I wouldn't rule it out. Let's put it that way. I wouldn't rule it out at this point. And since nothing's developed yet, we still have to kind of leave everything on the table. Norm Roberts, nice to see you on board. Hey, Delvin is on. Hey, Delvin, I think I broke the record the other day with an hour and 43 minutes. Oh, look who just walked in.
I just got a message.
La Rayo.
A message from one of your viewers.
Yeah.
Who says that your maps are.
I know. Who called? No, they told me. Yeah, I forgot to bring it up on the full screen.
Okay.
See, I make mistakes, Joe. I'm not the most perfect soul in the world.
I understand that. I'm just delivering. I'm the messenger tonight.
Well, I appreciate that.
Somebody just sent me a message on Facebook.
And this is a true friend. Okay, this is a true friend because he came all the way down the long poltergeist hallway to tell me this.
Yes.
And this really just makes me want to sing Cole Porter's Friendship, Friendship, just the perfect blendship. When other friendships have been forgot, ours will still be hot. Da 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 da.
All right.
Hip hip hip.
Some credibility here to this.
Oh, I lost that.
I'm assuming that you were already close to the end anyway.
I was just wrapping it up and saying goodbye. I was doing all my shameless self promotions.
I was back in the other in our working area.
Yeah.
Looking ahead 200 plus hours on the ensembles to see what the GFS and the European were suggesting with this system that was coming our way. Not this upcoming week, but the following.
The one for later next week.
And it hardly shows
in
up
theory.
on the ensembles, which is interesting enough. I mean, on the operational models at 240, there it is, plain as day.
Well, the new GFS, you can't find it. It's not there. Don't you love it? You've got a Category 3 hurricane on one run that runs up the East Coast. Shows you what a wasted night. And I say this many times, and every day I repeat this. It's a waste of time to look at what the models do with these things, especially when nothing's really developed yet.
Right.
So I think that makes sense. Scott Briller, and I meant to tell you this, by the way. So Scott Briller, I have the link inside. It's actually, I got to post it on Patreon too, because you were talking about Newfoundland.
Right.
And the Nat Geo channel has a special at 11 o'clock tonight about the whole story about Newfoundland and how they helped with all the planes that had to land
at
on
Gander.
At Gander.
At Gander.
And that's tonight at 11 o'clock. In fact, I have the Nat Geo link to that, which I will post up right now for everybody. Thank you, Scott, for bringing that up. If I don't remember, I need to be reminded of things.
I had
these
the
days.
honor and privilege of meeting the mayor of Bona Vista, Newfoundland. A nice lady who met our cruise ship at the pier in 1999, and I strongly suggest anybody who goes to Newfoundland go to Bona Vista. It's a very, very lovely city. I also stopped at we didn't stop, but we passed St. Anthony's, which is at the extreme northern end of Newfoundland, where the entire town stands out there and waves to you as your big passenger cruise ship passes on by. I love Newfoundland.
Yeah, see, that's on my list of places to go. I haven't been to I want to go to Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, and go to Newfoundland.
Right.
This I have to do.
And my wife and I just recently celebrated our 35th wedding anniversary, and my son, my daughter, and my future daughter-in-law chipped in, and they bought the two of us. He said, "We've got a surprise for you." And what's the big surprise? We're sending you to Broadway. We've got a pair of Broadway play tickets. And then my heart skipped a beat. I said, please.
Not cats. Cats.
I wanted Come From Away, which is the story about all the planes landing at Gander, Newfoundland. I found all of the critics said it was a wonderful play. Go see it on there. And it turned out to be... I understand. They thought
it was SpongeBob.
The Carole King.
Oh, the Carole King show. Yeah, that actually is pretty good.
24 Carole King songs.
Right.
And I'm not a big Carole King fan. I know some of her songs, but it would have been nice to see that other play. Maybe someday.
Well, they're still on Broadway. You can just go order tickets.
What?
Why do you have to wait for them to buy it? You go buy the tickets, bring them home, and say, Mrs. Rayo. Put down the wrench. You don't have to change the oil on the car now. We're going to go to a Broadway show.
She wants to see Carole King, so I'm not going to say anything about that.
All right.
I'm wondering, though, if there was a way you could swap tickets, Maybe go to somewhere in Broadway and say...
I'm sure if you're online, there's all these, what is it?
Two tickets
StubHub and...
Two tickets for Beautiful, Carole King. Swap them for two tickets for Come From Away.
Yeah, I think there's websites all over the place that do that sort of thing.
Whatever.
All right, thanks for telling me that they already did, and I'm saying good night.
I'm taking my leave too.
Okay, so everybody, thanks for being here. Appreciate it. Sorry for the map thing. I promise it won't happen tomorrow. And we'll see you tomorrow. Okay.